Now, I know it's still 4 minutes early. Technically, the podcast doesn't start till 10 o'clock today. I started the stream early because we had some connection problems last week, and I didn't want to, I wanted to test it to make sure it was working. So if you hit the stream button and you see that I'm podcasting now, not going to talk about a lot of the topics until we actually hit 10 o'clock. So I'm going to do a little housekeeping. First of all, for those of you who watch regularly, yes, the beard is off. Had a dentist appointment yesterday. Figured that the beard might interfere with what they're doing, so I took it off. For those of you who never have seen me without the beard, this is me without the beard. Yes, I have a baby face and big dimples. That's just the way it is. I usually have a beard when I'm at CPAC and so forth, so a lot of you have never seen me without a beard. But yes, there is a face under here, but unfortunately, you can also see the old stuff coming. Secondly, for those of you who have not watched the podcast before, again, we're doing housekeeping because the live stream, the podcast doesn't actually technically begin for 3 minutes. I started it early because of trouble. The reason why I wear the Doctor Who scarf and the hat, not just to cover my baldness, is because, well, it gets you noticed. When if you're in a pool of reporters trying to get a question in and you want to be noticed by somebody, a big hat and a 12-foot long multicolored scarf helps a lot. So people remember you. In fact, one of the reasons why Donald Trump during his 2016 campaign, I believe, remembered me and called on me the second time, I had shouted out a question that he took at a press conference in New Hampshire during the campaign. And he took my question, and he was shocked at the question because it wasn't a belligerent question. It was an actual news type question. It was the only question he got that day that was not, why do you suck? And he was so surprised. What a great question. Who are you? If you check my YouTube channel and just look up Donald Trump, you'll see that I've questioned him twice at news conferences. Well, the second time he called on me, it was in Worcester, and he probably recognized the hat and scarf. I mean, there's not a whole lot of people in the press who wear hats and scarves like this. So he recognized me and called on me. So that's why I do it. And another sneaky thing that I'm presuming that there's not a whole lot of people in the left who will be watching this podcast. One of the other advantages of the scarf, especially the Doctor Who scarf, is that leftists, when they see it, presume I'm a leftist. And thus, I can go into a leftist event or cover a leftist protest and so forth, and they look at me, and at first glance, they presume I'm a leftist, especially with Doctor Who going so crazy these days. So if the leftists actually followed who I was and what I said, it would mock me, and it sometimes does. But on the first curious glance, leftists see the scarf and assume I'm one of them, and allows me to get in, allows me to listen. Pool. See, good thing I started the thing. Oh, the connection is unstable. Okay, we're back. It's 10 o'clock now, so no more of the previews. We are officially starting the Tech Guy off the radio live stream podcast. I am your host, Pete the Tech Guy, half fedora, Doctor Who scarf, will travel, and without beard, as I mentioned in the preview. For those of you who have never seen me without a beard, I actually do have a face. And the beard being taken off takes a lot of years off of me, which doesn't really help all that much, frankly. But I'm married 32 years. It's not like I'm off chasing skirts. So thank you for joining us for this special edition of the Tech Guy off the radio live stream podcast, 10 a.m., because I'm going to be doing something with my wife this afternoon, as it's her day off. So I figure, move the podcast forward. After all, that is how you stay married 32 years. You make accommodations. You take care of what's important, and that is what's important. So again, thank you for being here. We have a lot to talk about, and I want to get to topic number one right away. And topic number one is the closing of the schools. And I got to tell you, Now, obviously, it's summer now, so the schools would already normally be closed. So that's not as big a deal as people might think right now. But yeah, and that's what I look like. I'm answering the thing. That's what I sound like. That's what I look like. I have a very distinctive voice. It was very good on radio, and it still is good on radio. I'm on noontime on WQPH 89.3 FM. I'm just answering a tweet that went out there. Someone's shocked that this is how I sound. Yeah, I do have a very distinctive voice that people can pick it out for a while. But anyways, I'm digressing again because I do that a lot. Drives my wife absolutely crazy. But the schools are closed. So the schools would normally be closed now. But now the time has come for the schools to be reopening. And people are waffling about the schools reopening. Now, part of that is, I'm sure, the fact that since your taxes have not gone down, if you're a city government, suddenly you're still collecting the property taxes and such that are paying for schools, but you don't have to put out the product. Now, maybe you're still paying teachers, which is the largest single expense, but there are a lot of expenses that you're not spending right now, but you're still getting the tax money. It's sort of like ESPN. They're still getting the subscriber money, but they're not, they're being prorated because there's no games to broadcast. So their contracts obviously will take that into account. So they're probably making a lot of money by doing nothing. The return of sports is actually going to cost them a little bit of money, which is amusing. So the question is, the schools are reopening, and there's a clash between the president, who wants the schools reopened, and a lot of these liberals who don't want the schools reopened. And I think, in a way, this is kind of backwards, as we finally had people start admitting out loud that, and this is something I've talked about for years, is that the schools have been against us for a long time. And the reason why the schools have been against us for a long time is that our enemies have invested in them. And I don't mean the tax dollars. I mean our enemies like China, like Russia, like the Soroses, like the leftists. For example, in many elections, Soros's team made it a point to invest in sheriff and attorney general elections because they understood that those are the people who choose to enforce the law or not. So if they can choose which laws are being enforced, like Mayor de Blasio saying, yes, Black Lives Matter, things can continue, but other large assemblies cannot. As long as they have their people enforcing the laws, they're happy with it. Now, the logic behind spending money on schools, on American schools and American colleges and American politicians is very simple. Let's say you have a large weapon system. Let's say there's a bomber that costs $450 million or $50 million even. Let's say it costs $50 million for a bomber of some type. Now, if you're in an arms race with the United States, you're going to lose. In fact, that's how the Soviet Union fell, because they could not keep up with us financially once Reagan decided, I'm going to go forward with Star Wars. And they just didn't have the money. They could not keep up. Because weapon systems are expensive. They get obsolete. You have to maintain them and so forth. Much easier to buy people. People are cheap. A college will give you lots of satisfaction. $50,000 will buy a lot of satisfaction from a college, especially if there's a prospect of another $50,000 or another $50,000. For the price of one weapon system, for the price of one bomber, $50 million. Let's say we're talking about $100,000 grants to colleges or to professors. Do you realize how many of those grants 50 million is? So figure 100,000, 10 per million. That's 500 different colleges or 500 different professors they can buy for the price of one bomber. And they're likely to stay bought. And not only do they stay bought, they teach people. So you buy the school boards, you buy the professors, you buy those people cheap. And now suddenly they're voting for you. Suddenly you have textbooks that don't teach history. Suddenly you, and more importantly, people see the money and want it again. They want to get that money again. And because they want to keep getting those contributions, have you noticed how everybody has a nonprofit? This nonprofit group, that nonprofit group. And it's funny, and I'm going to tell you a story. I was covering an event in New Hampshire a few years back, and somebody liked what I was doing. and wanted to give me a big tip jar hit and asked if I had a nonprofit. And I said, well, I don't have a nonprofit. And the reason I asked why I had a nonprofit is because they had a foundation, and the foundation gives to nonprofits. And so they could help me out through the foundation. And what they ended up doing, since I don't have a nonprofit, I do broadcasting for Catholic radio stations. So they gave a gift to the Catholic radio station on the condition that a part of that gift went to me to pay for my radio show, as pay for my radio show. So I actually got a check. I get paid by just the publicity of having the show. But that year I got a check, which was very nice because none of us got paid because we're just trying to evangelize. But the point is, that happened to me on a small scale, and I still have part of that money in the bank because that's a rainy day fund. What's funny is this is what's done on a large scale. These leftist nonprofits, they pump millions into this, and it's a tax write-off for a lot of these people. It's a tax write-off. So they can give money to these foundations and such, these quote nonprofits. Now, that doesn't mean an individual doesn't profit. I profited by several $1,000s that time, and it was really, really useful. But that's how that money gets funneled in. And that's what's been happening with the schools for a very long time, because it's easier than an arms race. And given that the schools don't know, I mean, you have students who do not know why World War II was fought. They do not know that America is unique among the countries of the world in that we literally, after World War II, we could have, if we wanted to be the next Roman Empire, if we wanted to conquer and hold the world, we could have. We gave it all back. Even after the war with Spain, when we got caught, we gave things back. The reason why Cuba is not a U.S. territory is the U.S. said, you're independent. The Philippines, you're independent. Go ahead. The U.S. has given back over and over again this century. Now, yeah, I'll admit, during the 1845 war with Mexico, that was pretty imperialistic. And it actually had more to do with Texas and with slavery in a lot of words. I've actually been reading a lot about that lately. In fact, if you want to really learn history, you'll go to my website, DaTechGuyblog.com. There's links to 4 books. I have the hardcover books myself because I'm a great believer in books. In fact, I've got one of them here. I'm going to go off camera for a second to grab a copy of this book. And you've got to... This is a wonderful book. There's 5 volumes to it. And this one, I believe, is volume 3. Yeah, this one's volume 3, American History as Told by Contemporaries. As you can see by its condition, it is very old. This particular copy is 110 years old. It's written by Albert Bushnell Hart. And I've been reading about, and it basically, instead of just writing history, it's literally excerpts from people's writing and speeches and such, so that they tell the story of history themselves. And it talked about the debates about slavery, the debates back and forth, and you're actually hearing people in their own words and learning. People don't know these things. I had on this morning about 1 o'clock. I put on Victory at Sea, which, if you're my age, you'll know the score. You hear the music, you'll remember it, because it used to be played at like 1 o'clock in the morning all the time. It was one of the most successful shows NBC ever had, and it was a history of the Second World War. And I think it should be required watching for students, because they will understand, first, what war is, second, what it costs, and third, what the United States did to save people. And I'm a little biased there. My father fought in that world. My father was in the Pacific, and he came back alive, which I'm very grateful for. Otherwise, I would not be here podcasting. But the students are not being taught. I mean, we literally had a professor who's going to be teaching saying that the idea that 2 + 2 is 4 is a construct, is an evil construct. It's a Western imperialistic concept. And of course, and it would not surprise me that you don't want students to know math. If you are the deep state, if you are cheating people, if you want people to be able to be fooled, you don't want them to know math. I remember there was an episode of The Richard Sharp movies. I don't know if you ever saw any of them with Sean Bean, where they're talking about how if you can't do your sums, you can't tell if the commissary sergeant's cheating you. And that's the purpose. That's the purpose of being able to go to school, is to learn how to read, to learn how to write, to learn how to do sums. You need to know how to read properly so that you can read a contract. When you click I accept to those things, I always read them first, because you want to know. That is what schools are for, so you can read and understand what this says so that you cannot be cheated. You need to be able to write so that you can express what you're saying in writing for people to believe it. And just on as a cultural measure to that side, I always love when people say to me, well, I was thinking of getting married, but it's just a piece of paper. Is your mortgage just a piece of paper? Would you do a house rental or any of these things without something signed and a piece of paper? Yet you're going to say, well, we don't need a piece of paper to be married. That's just a cop out. That's why you learn to write, so you can have things written, so you can have things plainly stated, which is one of the reasons why the courts and lawyers drive you crazy, because their job is to try and twist what's clearly stated so that people can have it differently. And you need to know math to find out if you're cheated. If you know math, it is harder to be cheated. And of course, if you know math, you know science. But we've reached a point where science is so politicized, and it's a terrible, terrible thing that we've reached this point where we actually had a scientific study retracted. Heather McDonald writes and this is mentioned on Instabundle today, quote, I cited their study, so they disavowed it. If scientists retract research that challenges reigning orthodoxies, politics will strive scholarship. Well, Heather News, it already does. It already does, and people have paid for it. And the reason why people go along with it is because they're afraid of their jobs. If you are a teacher who has a potential pension that you can lose and a job that's fairly safe, are you going to have the bravery to challenge the orthodoxy and risk that job, risk that pension? If you are not a person of independent means, are you going to risk? What are you willing to risk? That's where courage is the first virtue, because without courage, the other virtues will not work. And once people, and that's how cancel culture works, by the way, and to take advantage of people's vulnerabilities. And we're going to get to more of that in topic number 2 very shortly. But the schools being closed are a blessing in disguise, because if people are homeschooling, people are teaching their children how to read, how to write, how to do math, and how to think. How to think is the most important thing. How to reason. Now, some people are going to reason wrong. Some people are going to reason bad. Some people aren't talented. But that's the way it is. And I actually wrote about this earlier this week, and the day after I wrote about it, Rush started talking about it. Then Kurt Schlechter, who is much more popular than me, did a piece about it as well. But I said, now is the time. Now is the time to reform our schools while they're closed. I know the president wants to get them open, and I know there's a lot of people who want the schools open, but now is the time. As I said in my piece, I mean, we've reached, and this is frankly the logical conclusion of removing prayer from school. 3 generations later, when all the teachers who were in place and all the students who were in place, who all understood the culture as it was, have died out. The last of the students who were taught by the teachers who understood the American culture, when the Supreme Court made their ruling, they've gone from the students. Some of them were now teachers and parents, then their grandparents. Now they're dead. Now they're mostly dead. I mean, my sister's 71 and so forth. But now, actually, my sister's 73 this year. No, 72 this year. But that's beside the point. I'm the youngest of 5. But now you have a generations where you have a highly medicated student body that is taught America is the source of all evil and requires police to keep them in line in the school. And this is despite all the evidence to the contrary about America. And we've already talked about teachers, professional teachers who are claiming 2 + 2 is 4 is Western imperialism. This is the time we say, you want to open schools? First thing, Howard Zinn gone. Howard Zinn was 30 years ago when he was talking history, it was a joke because he's the guy who doesn't cite sources. One of the greatest thing about this book, about Albert Bushnell Hart, who was a Harvard professor, he wrote literally hundreds of books, and he wrote these 5 volumes over the course of like 30 years. And most of these volumes, I don't think this particular volume has it, but it has a section on how to use sources and how reliable they should be used, because it was about teaching teachers how to teach history as well. And one of the things that I love about this book is when he cites someone, when he quotes them, he mentions, it is in this, sources and their uses. So again, it talks about sources and their uses, use of sources. And I want to read this. It's worth reading this part to you. Educated value of sources. And he talks about how original material is important. And that's how you teach. Classification of extracts in this volume. Cautions as to sources. And he talks about biases here. And I'm going to read you this little piece. The intelligent teacher or student or writer will scarcely need to be told that he must keep his eyes open in dealing with original materials. In such collections as this, a part of the danger is that it's to be eliminated by careful editing, and series of extracts ought to generally include only writers of tried veracity and weight, so that the question of truthful intention will not come in. Again, and this is just part of it. All of the volumes have that. Chapter 1 of every volume is about how to trust sources, how to teach. And yes, my eyes are going to the point where I needed that light to read it. It's a very small print. Apparently, people had better eyes in 1911. But this is important. What I would do is I would get rid of the public schools altogether. Not that they weren't a good idea at the time, but I would basically give the tax money that, let's say it costs $5,000 to educate a student. Here's that $5,000 voucher, or make it $4,500 to pay for some of the administrative work of doing the voucher system. You may put this towards any school you want. And all schools will be private schools. $4,500, any school you want. Now you have people competing for that money. And not only do you have people competing to that money, but competing to those parents. Here is how your child will be educated. You come out of here, he's going to be able to read. He's going to be able to write. He's not going to be an activist. He's not going to be in some stupid gender studies thing. He's going to be, or she is going to be able to learn. Or even in apprentice programs. Because a carpenter, an electrician. My dad didn't get past the 6th grade. He quit school because it was during the Depression. And he learned to be a carpenter. Smarter than I've ever been. Able to do things. There are things that I wish I could do around the house. Like, we're getting a new shed. Our shed's falling apart. And if I had the skills my father had, I wouldn't have to get a new shed. I'd be able to build one. My dad built the first 2. Every house I lived in before I got married, and I lived in with my parents until the day I got married. I moved out the day I got married. Was a house my father had built himself. He wasn't an educated man, but he was a wise man. And these are skills that people can get jobs with. People can support themselves on plumbing, on electrician, on being able to do electrical work and so forth. That's what should be done. That could be done now. There should be pilot programs all over the country for this. And it can be sold as, well, we have to be careful with schools, so more apprentice programs. This could be sold. We need to jump at this now. And yes, I understand that there are other advantages to public schools. But I'm telling you, if we're reopening these schools, all we're doing is putting back a system that's out to get us. Why would we want to do this? Why would we want to do this? This is why the schools being closed are a blessing, because people will find out. People will find out the consequences. When people find out that their kids are reading better and thinking clearer, then you're gonna see the difference. Now, will it happen? I don't know. I really don't know. But we should be considering this. We should be considering this huge. And yes, Kurt Schlichter put it better than I did in a lot of ways because, well, Kurt Schlichter does that. He has a new book out, by the way. I haven't bought it yet, but I intend to. Anything Kurt writes is worth buying, frankly. But this has been a blessing in disguise. And another blessing from this, and actually I found this out when I mentioned my dentist before the podcast actually started to the first 5 minutes. My dentist is a woman in her 40s who didn't expect to have children. She ended up pregnant, much to her delight, and she and her husband have a toddler now. And because she's a dental hygienist, cleaning your teeth, for several months she was at home. And there's two things she noted about it. First, how much work being at home was. I mean, anyone who doubts that being a housewife or a mother is not real work should actually try it. It is, chasing a toddler is a lot of work. And she was talking about how much work it was, but she was also talking about the satisfaction of raising her child, of being there. And I think a lot of people are discovering that. There are a lot of silver linings to all this that's happened. So a lot of the minutiae that people say that God knows what he's doing. I may not know what God's doing, but God does. And he tends to grow flowers from some incredible manure. But again, I think people are figuring this out. And I'd like us to take advantage of it. I don't know that the president will. Hopefully he will. But again, as I was saying earlier, the reason why this cancel culture works, especially in the schools, is because school teaching is such a good gig right now with the unions and such. People don't want to risk it. And that gets us to topic number 2, which is J.K. Rowling. Now, J.K. Rowling and I have something in common, and it's not wealth. Let me tell you that. J.K. Rowling was not a member of the elites and wrote and became what she was, a writer, afterwards. She didn't set out to be a writer. She became a writer afterwards when her stories took off. I did not study to be a reporter. My goal, actually what I wanted to be in school was a history teacher. I loved history all my life. I collected history books, still do. And what happened was, when I lost my job in 2008, I was living very well before President Obama was elected. I had a good job. I had a good insurance. I was looking strong. Then President Obama got elected, and within a couple of months, I was laid off, and I've never been back in the tech industry again. I started writing and blogging. I had been doing some tech blogging for the company I worked for before that, and a podcast actually with them as well. Back in the 2000s, when it was fairly new, I started doing this to do something. And the Scott Brown election put me on the map. Stacey McCain got me to CPAC, and I went from there. And I ended up covering congressional and presidential elections and governor elections, local elections. I traveled all across the country on your dime, on the tip jar hits that you guys gave. That's what made it possible. Although I tried to make it into a viable business. My plan was to try and do this full time, and it just didn't work out. There was just not enough money in it. I mean, there are people. I make enough to pay for what I do now, and have a little bit extra, but I couldn't support myself on it, and the fault has to be on me. If I was better at it, if I worked as hard as some other people have, I'd be able to make a living off of this, and I just plain can't. But the point was, though, I was credentialed media, and I was inside the media with a mindset that didn't come from media. So I was able to look at things objectively because I was trained as an engineer. My major is computer science. My degree is computer science. So I looked at it with those eyes, those non-journalist eyes, but those historians' eyes. My minor was American history, and saw things as they were because I was not one of the bubble people. J.K. Rowling is in that same situation. She gained wealth from her book. Her values were not the values of the elite. Now, she's a feminist, a big feminist, and I disagree with her on a lot there. Abortion would be a great example of this. But the point is, she got to where she was and came with it with outside eyes. So when the question of is a man actually a man or a woman actually a woman comes up, Rowling's doesn't hesitate about it. And there's all these people, we're going to cancel J.K. Rowling. Well, unlike the teacher who can't do without that $50,000 a year job or $60,000, whatever that teacher happens to make in that pension, and unlike that writer who needs all the cliques to promote their book, to get on the TV shows, to say these nice things about them, Rowling has made enough from the Harry Potter books and movies that it doesn't matter what people say. They can try and cancel her. There are still millions of people who have read Harry Potter and love the books. They are not they cannot hurt her in the same way that you cannot stop a Clint Eastwood, in the same way that you can. She has reached a point where she is strong enough that she can have her values and not be and not care. If she lost 1 million Twitter followers, she'd still have tons of Twitter followers, assuming that she cares about if she has Twitter followers. And I'm in the same position in reverse. I am not a rich person. I work in a warehouse as my day job. And if Twitter decided to ban me, if YouTube decided to if I get enough subscribers, I still don't have enough subscribers to monetize the YouTube channel. You have to have 1,000. I'm like in the 700s or high 700s, low 800s. If I get enough to monetize the channel, if I get popular enough, sooner or later a leftist is going to complain about me and cancel the channel. And though I enjoy doing the podcast, and I do it for a particular reason, which we'll talk about in a few seconds, if it happens, I still have my life. I was around long before all of this stuff existed, and I lived without it, and I was happy. And although I enjoy spending this time with you, I've enjoyed my time on the radio that was on for several years, syndicated. Enjoyed the radio show I do now, the Catholic radio show I do now, Saturdays at noon on WQPH 89.3 FM. You can listen to it live online. If it stopped tomorrow, I'd still have plenty to do with my life. This is what I do, what I would have liked to have done for a living, but if I don't, I'll live, I'll get by. And as long as you are able, as long as you don't need these things, as long as you can say, if you cancel me, so what? So, what is this, high school? I'm going to worry about if somebody's talking about me? Maybe when I was 16, that might have bothered me. But I'm 57. What do I care? You think I'm going to worry about my life, whether or not some person dislikes me? And frankly, I'm not making enough. Someone called my business, we should get rid of this person. Why, you think I can't get another small job? Obama took out the big job I had. Can't get it back. And frankly, being a very vocal and known Trump supporter in Massachusetts doesn't get you hired in the tech industry here. The tech industry here is very left. I'm never gonna see one of those jobs again. I look on occasion, but I also have good benefits where I am in terms of medical, so I'm not inclined to leave, and I'm getting too old to worry about that stuff. But the point is, cancel culture only works in terms of intimidation if you care if you're canceled. I don't care. Rowling doesn't care if these people cancel. It's the elites who wanted to be near her. And it reminds me of what I read, an autobiography. I think I've got it around here somewhere. There's books all over this house. A biography of Rocky Marciano. And Marciano had a reputation for being cheap, for making other people pay. And the reason why he did that was advice his father had given him and said, listen, None of these people want to be with you, Rocky. They want to be with the champion. So make them pay. Let them pay. Their association with you is just to make them feel better about themselves. The people who associated with J.K. Rowling wanted to be known as elite, which is actually kind of funny when you think about Giselle Maxwell, because Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, because of his money and stuff, people want to be associated with them because of the money, because they were hoping to get money. And now all those pictures of people with Maxwell are funny. And that's actually happened with Trump in the sense that all these people who criticized Donald Trump the most now, 15 years ago, back when Trump was my age, were rushing to praise him, rushing to give him awards because they wanted money from him. They wanted things from him. They wanted to be associated with the Trump brand because it made them more elite. That's why Trump's able to beat these guys over and over again, because he knows how phony they are. But that's what cancel culture is all about. And that's the one thing I have in common with J.K. Rowling. Also, I have one book published. The book is Hail Mary, the Perfect Protestant Catholic Prayer. You can find it on Amazon.com if you're interested in a Catholic book about the Hail Mary, which I hope you are interested in it. Part of every sale goes to WQPH. Well, that's the business about cancel culture. That's the thing about J.K. Rowling. And I mentioned Donald Trump, and he put out a tweet today just before the show started that jumped at me, and it actually corresponded with something I'd written about a while back. And he's talking about mail-in ballots and how it's fraud. And I want to read you the president's tweet, and I want to read you my responses to it. The president tweeted out, quote, "Mail-in ballot fraud found in many elections. People are just now seeing how bad and dishonest and how slow it is. Election results could be delayed for months. No more big election-like answers. 1% not even counted in 2016. Ridiculous. Just a formula for rigging an election. Absentee ballots are fine because you have to go through a precise process to get your voting privilege. Not so with mail-ins. Rigged election, 20% fraudulent ballots." And the left keeps pushing them. In fact, one of the replies to those tweets was from a leftist who was over there saying, well, he doesn't understand that they're all absentee ballots are mail-in ballots. It's the exact same thing. And I tweeted back this response to the president. I said, here's a better question, Mr. President. If the Democrats insist that you cheated to win in election 2016 without mail-in ballots, why do they suddenly trust you not to cheat with mail-in ballots vulnerable to fraud in election 2020? Let me repeat that. Here's a better question, Mr. President. If Democrats insist that you cheated to win election 2016 without mail-in ballots, why do they suddenly trust you not to cheat with mail-in ballots vulnerable to fraud in election 2020? It's even funnier when you consider that as POTUS, President of the United States, you would have a longer reach and be more able to use the power of government to exploit vulnerabilities of such ballots to your advantage. Because you have voting lists, you have census lists. If President Trump was corrupt, he'd be able to exploit mail-in ballots. He'd be able to win California because he'd be able to cheat. And if he had all this Russian money, if he was all these things that the left pretends he is, he'd have all the money and all the apparatus to do it. And again, the left keeps saying he's doing all these corrupt things, yet they're trying to push a system that would enable him. Why is he suddenly so trustworthy, according to the left? Well, I submit and suggest that it's not a question of them. They know that he didn't cheat last time, and they know they're trying to cheat. And it's so obvious. It's like watching the Soviet Union. I used to work. My first job out of college was for Raytheon, and I worked with a fella who was from the Soviet Union. He had gotten out of the Soviet Union. Alex Lewinsky, nice guy. And I remember he would talk about the Soviet Union sometimes, and how people, how it was a lie, how so much of it was a lie. And when I hear the left today, when I hear the media today, it's It's amazing to hear that coming up. But it's not amazing because I've already explained at the beginning of the podcast how they're buying this stuff. But the thing is, the people inside the Soviet Union understood it for the lie it was. And I think Americans understand the lies they're being told. And one of the things with the Soviet Union is there was an old joke saying, oh, they pretend to pay us. That's all right. We pretend to work, which is why their productivity was so poor. And that people would express themselves by subtle ways. Now, in America, we have elections. And we have the secret ballot. Now, mail-in ballots can be less secret, which is another reason why the left wants this, because they want to be able to intimidate. What's funny about all this is that people do not understand that people given the chance to fight back against people who are oppressing them will do so. And that's why they're talking about all of these different people who are putting out like the Lincoln Project. I remember I was talking about nonprofits at the beginning and how people make money with nonprofits. The Lincoln Project is a perfect example of it. They are open. They literally exist for political consultants who do not get money in the Trump administration to get free money. That's the Lincoln Project. If people associated with the Lincoln Project are there to get the money. That's what it's about. Let's not pretend that it's anything other than that. But if you think that people are telling pollsters the truth, if you are a person, we've already seen how people treat. We've seen people in MAGA hats getting beaten. We've seen what happens. I've seen stores put up signs saying that they support Black Lives Matter because they don't want a rock through their window. People know when they're being oppressed. Do you really think that the people who voted for Trump last time are going to vote to give the people who want to oppress them the power to do so? Do you really think that people are not going to fight back at the ballot box? I think the only thing that's going to make this election close is fraud. The only thing that's going to help the Democrats is fraud and the fact that this time they see Trump coming. They didn't see Trump coming last time. They believe their own hype. Now, they're still selling the same hype this time, but they don't believe it themselves. The left isn't acting. The left is not acting as if they believe it. If the left thought that they could win, they'd not be. The way they're pushing Biden, the way they're trying to hide Biden, the way they're trying to now make excuses for the debates to keep him out of them and so forth. This is not what confident people do. President Trump's going to win this election. Okay, it's July 10th, 2020. I'm telling you this. President Trump's going to win this election. It doesn't mean we don't have to work hard. It doesn't mean we don't have to push voters out there. It doesn't mean that we don't have to do everything we do. Now, if everyone stays home because they think President Trump's already going to win, then yeah, I will be wrong. I've already bet $300 with different people online. I think the most interesting thing about those bets is I was ready to designate a third-party person and put that money out there so that the third-party person would hold the money. And I was picking Biden, and my third-party person was going to be a Biden person. None of the leftists I bet with said, "Oh, we'll just keep our honor, and we'll see." And I said, "All right." Now, I know I'll pay off if I lose. I don't know if they'll pay off if they win. We'll find out. But I'll make a lot of. I think it'll be worth not getting the 300 to be able to display the leftist says they are. Of course, if they don't pay off, they'll block me. But if they do pay off, then I'll give them props for paying off. I'll give them a few extra days because they'll be really down when it happens. But you'll notice that people are saying, "Oh, well, no, we're not going to vote for Trump." Well, who do you think is going to win? Oh, Trump's going to win. People, if you ask people who they think is going to win, they say Trump. Now, why do they think that? Oh, I'm not voting for him, but I think he's going to win. Why do you think they think that? Because they see reality for what it is. Unlike the teachers who are spinning reality in order to keep from getting canceled, unlike the left that's spinning reality in terms of ballots, unlike the media that spins reality, unlike the cancel culture people who all spin reality. If you ask people the right way, the answer comes. People understand what's going on. People know this. And this is why they're talking about this vote in the Seattle City Council, getting ready to vote to defund the police by a large margin. I think we're going to find out. This is the time when Seattle the GOP should be running in every seat in Washington, in the legislature, and in every city council election in Seattle. Now's the time to run it. Now's the time to give the clear choice. Is Chop Chaz what you wanted? And this should be happening in Minneapolis. This should be happening in Atlanta. The choice is now there. The choice is now being illustrated. I mean, we've already seen the double standards where we've got two people painting over a Black Lives mural who are facing a year in jail for hate crimes. It's been called vandalism, but statues being pulled down is not a Nancy Pelosi saying people will do what they do. This is the choice. People understand this choice. People know it. People understand it because it's their lives. People understand when their lives are in place. And now the choice is going to be made. And America, being the republic that it is, will get the government it deserves. And I say we deserve better. I think this is going to turn out very good for us. I think President Trump is going to win re-election. I've already stated it. Because people understand it. People in the ballot box will say fearlessly what they can't say out loud for fear of their car being keyed or for fear of a stone going through my window or something. There's a reason why there's not a Trump sign in front of my house. Now, I personally would like to put it out there. It's been suggested to me by another person in the family that, nope, I'm not going to do that. And I understand. It's how much are you willing to risk? And my thought right now is that, and that's another secret of being married for 32, to stay married 32 years, know what hills to die on. I got to finish that book. It's just about finished. We got 32 tips of being married 32 years. I've got it just about all written. I'm going to have to, this month, I got to finish getting it done. But that's what it comes down to. Will people have the courage in the ballot box that they may not be able to show in public? And I think they will. And I remember reading histories about the election of 1948, Harry Truman's election. And everyone was talking about how big Truman was going to be. Shep O'Neill was traveling the country, and people were saying out loud, "Oh, Truman's going to lose," and O'Neill's over there, he's going to win this state. Confidentially, he's going to win our state too. He says, "What?" People were saying something different out loud because they're trying to influence the election. They're not people reporting. Reporters are no longer reporters. Reporters are people with an agenda. And again, I take you back to the Trump event in Worcester that I covered as Credentialed Press and being in the press room. And I wrote about this at the time. I'm in the press room with one of the things Donald Trump did during his presidential run, which I thought was brilliant. And a lot of people didn't catch on to why he was doing it. He'd always have his press conferences before he would speak. And that way, if something happened at an event that could have hurt him, not in the press conference, and if he goes to the next event and it's the next day, then it's old news. So it's very smart the way he did this. Well, they ushered us all into the press room, and I'm in the press room, and I'm setting up because I had my laptop. My batteries was always terrible, so I would plug in my laptop and I would be typing. I was typing my story, and all these reporters are behind me, all younger than me. And I'm sitting there with this hat and this scarf and my suit because actually had to work that night. I was working an overnight shift at the warehouse. So I was going to be going, I ended up going to work that day in a full three-piece suit with my Trump press badge on me, which got me a lot of looks where I was, let me tell you. But I'm listening to them. And remember, these are supposedly competing news organizations. And they were literally choreographing what they were going to say and how they were going to say it. If you hit him here, I'll hit him here. And then you follow. And they were literally, it was like a choreographed fight in a TV show or a movie. It wasn't the question of reporters just being reporters. It was a question of all these supposedly competing reporters who are supposedly trying to get people to watch their shows, their network, their newspaper, all coordinating how they were going to deal with this presidential candidate in order to have him. And I'm listening to this, and it really bothered me. And I'm reminded, and like even 4 years earlier, I was covering a Mitt Romney event in New Hampshire. In fact, it was the first time that he had introduced his vice presidential pick, Paul Ryan. I'm covering it was at St. Anselm College, and I'm credentialed press there, and I'm in the press tent after the event and writing. And I remember, and again, one of the things I would do is I would listen to hear what all the other press people were saying. And there was a father and a son who would come over to the line and had asked where Mitt Romney was because he wanted to get a picture of him. He wanted the son to meet Mitt Romney. And they told, well, he's having lunch with the priests and the thing, and he'll be out later in that building over there. And as they walked away, every single press person in earshot was making fun of the father and the son at the idea. Oh, he wants to have what a corny, what's this? And it was just berating him. And all I could think to myself is, what horrible people these people are. Tearing down the father and his son. I mean, and this is what the press is, but this is what they've been. What I think the most valuable thing of the Trump years has been is that we've seen the press for what they are. We've seen a lot of things have been revealed for what they are. And it's like the line from the Second Kings where the prophet Nathan says to David, "You've done this thing in secret." When he has adultery with the wife of Uriah the Hittite, she gets pregnant. He arranges Uriah, who's one of his loyal soldiers, to be in front to get killed when he can't. He tried to fix it so that Uriah would think that it was his kid. Didn't work, so he gets him killed, so that he can end up, taking her as one of the wives. And the prophet Nathan says, "You have done this thing in secret, but I will do it in broad daylight with the sun shining down." What President Trump has done is brought into broad daylight relief what the press actually is and what these guys are. And it's amazing how fast. And people have been saying, it's amazing how fast the left suddenly turned on Mount Rushmore and so forth. No, it's not amazing. The difference is they're not pretending anymore. The left is not pretending they like America anymore. They're not pretending they like democracy anymore. They're not pretending they like science in terms of observation and report. They're not pretending that they're not putting up the pretense of unbiasedness in the news. They're not putting up the pretense, like Mark College and that student who they were going to reject because she was pro-Trump. They're not pretending anymore. They are showing you what they are. And there's an old Sicilian saying, or at least a saying my father used to say, if someone says they're going to kill you, believe them and act accordingly. These people are not pretending that they love America or anything other than what they are anymore. And we should take them at their word and act accordingly. And I think Americans will. Now there are some people who get rich off of this. There are some people who will make their money off of this. Again, point to the Lincoln Project and so forth. There are some people And just like in Saddam Hussein's regime, there were some people who made out well, because they were favored by this. They were able to make their money, make their living. And those people who have that advantage are going to support this stuff for their own self-interest. And that's going to be a percentage of the population. Maybe 25, maybe as high as 30% the population will fall for this. And like when I was talking about having independent schools, if that happened, there would be schools out there for people who wanted their children to be taught how to be woke, because there's a demand for it. There's always going to be a demand for this type of thing. And even if you have, and I wrote about this one of the first things I ever wrote was about crazy uncles, and how, you'd have a family thing and there was always one crazy uncle. And the thing about the internet is allows the crazy uncles to band together. And if 1% of the population is absolutely positively bonkers, when you have a country of 330 million, 1% of the population is 3.3 million. And if they can network, they become a lot louder than they are. It's like Twitter. Glenn Reynolds described Twitter as a reverse iceberg. 90% represents a tenth more than what they have. They're just very loud. 90% of the noise. And I never forget, on election night, Glenn Reynolds made it a point when being interviewed by the BBC that 90% of reporters give the other 10% a bad name, the honest ones. And the BBC didn't comment on it. They just let it slide because they thought he had just misspoke, reversing it, but he did that deliberately. And they didn't pick up on it, because if they had picked up on it, then would have come the explanation, which not have worked out so well. But that's why I'm confident about this. Now, here's what I think. I mean, the power is big. For example, the Washington Redskins business and the cancel culture. The Redskins just say, we're keeping the name. Do what you want. It's not going to affect the fan base. The fan base is still going to be there. And if FedEx doesn't want to put an ad, or Amazon, there are plenty of people who are going to want that money. It doesn't matter. There will be other people there. If all they need is guts for a day. Because threats don't mean anything until after. A lot of people worry about threats, but the reality is what matters. And the reality is this, that most of the people in cancel culture are weak. It's noise. Most of the stuff against Trump isn't weak. It's noise. The people who actually live in places like Baltimore, the people who actually live in places like Atlanta, they know they need police protection. They know they need more cops. Now, you're going to get some people, like as I said, there's always some crazy uncles. You're going to get some people like that stupid neighborhood in Minneapolis that has vowed not to call the cops, and sexual assaults and all these things are going up. And they're not calling the cops because they want to prove how woke they are. You can't do anything with masochists. Crazy people are crazy people. But I think this election is going to go the right way. And the final thought that really handles it with me comes from the movie True Grit. And I'm talking about the original one with John Wayne. Maddie Ross comes to see John Wayne's character, Rooster Cogburn. And she's talking about how she wants to hire him. She wants to bring Tom Chaney in and so forth. And during the scene, a rat is at the cornbread. There's, the rat in the building. And John Wayne pulls out his gun and says, "Mr. Rat, this is a rat raid." It says, "You are hereby ordered to desist from eating Chinley's cornbread, and this is legal notice of same." And he turns to Maddie Ross, pays no attention. Bam! Shoots the rat. And he turns to Maddie Ross and says, "You can't serve papers on a rat. You have to either kill him or leave him be." You're not going to be able to, we're not going to be able to reason with these people. We're not going to be able to talk these people out. We're going to have to either vote them out, we're going to have to either beat them at the polls, or we're going to have to leave them be and let them do what they want to do. And I submit and suggest, as the president submitted and suggested, that if we don't beat them at the polls, if we don't fight them at the polls, we're going to have to fight them. Actually fight them. With all the consequences thereof. I think that's a bad idea. I think it would lead to horrible things. Horrible things that this country has not experienced in a very long time. It's been 140 years or so, 130, 140 years since the last Indian Wars. Since there were Americans who had to worry about people coming to their house on a daily basis to kill them. It's been 70 years since the Klan was in a position to raid with impunity. It's been a lot of years since Americans have had to really worry about their necks on a daily basis. You don't want that back. Now, I want to also mention, because I meant to mention this a little bit earlier, that the reason why we do this podcast is for two reasons. First, the goal number one was to increase the traffic of the site. And I'd like to thank you all who have been visiting the site, because our traffic is definitely up. If you look at our monthly traffic since I've done the podcast, it is definitely up. The graph is, we're not quite where I would like to be, or where we once were when I was bigger and when my ambitions were larger. But the traffic since the pod, May and June, we've been doing anywhere from as much as 30 to 50% more over May and June than we had in January, February, March, and so forth. So the traffic side has been pretty good. The second reason for the podcast was I'm trying to get about $180 more a month in terms of tip jar hits. And this month, it's only July 10th. Last month, we did terrible in terms of we did great in terms of traffic. It was our best month since I've been on the new platform, but we didn't do much on the tip jar. This month, I'm only $20 away from my goal for the month. So, and then we've still got another 3 weeks to go. So, 20 more bucks in a tip jar, and we will have reached my goal for the podcast for the month. So, if you like what you hear, if you think what we do here is worth your while, share it. I mean, there's a lot of people who retweeted the stuff about my podcast. Not as many of them watched, but send it out to people so they don't watch the live stream. They can watch it after the fact. This is a no frills podcast. You don't see anything fancy. It's like my old radio show. It's just me talking. Maybe I'd have a guest. Maybe someday I'll do this remotely and have a guest with me, and there'll be two of us talking. But no, it's a no frills podcast. It's just me. If you like what you see, share it on Facebook. I don't do Facebook. Share it on Parler. I don't do Parler. They need a cell phone. I don't have a cell phone, and I'm not signing up for Google Phone to get it. I thought about it, and I didn't know. And my 800 number won't work because, yes, I still have the radio show's 800 number. Believe it or not, I saved it for myself, and I may find a use for it someday. But if you like it, share it. If you really like it, if you don't already subscribe to me on YouTube, subscribe. That way I'll get enough people to monetize the site, and then the left can attack it and demonetize it. And so since that's the inevitable result of all that, let's just cut out the middleman and hit the tip jar. If you think what I say is worthwhile. Really appreciate it. And if you don't, that's fine too. You can always pray for me. Prayers are good. Prayers are valuable. If you like what you see here, go to the website, DaTechGuyblog.com. That's DaTechGuy blog.com. Check me out. I write something every day. We have our paid writers, our Magnificent Seven, which for the rest of the year is probably going to be 6 because thanks to the law in California, Baldilocks is at her limit in the number of times she can write for me. And if she writes for me for free, then there's going to be problems. So there's no way around it as far as the law goes. And I'm not going to get myself sued, and she's not going to get me sued. So go to her site, hit her tip jar, because I can't pay her. She can't write for me, so I can't pay her, which means that she's short. So if you can hit her hit my tip jar if you can, but hit her tip jar too if you can, and spread that message, because these are the real life consequences of the left virtue signaling. This is the real life consequence. There's plenty of people who are suffering these real life consequences. And in states that are as far gone as California and as far gone here as Massachusetts and others, it's only going to stop when the pain from these stupid decisions reaches a point that forces it to stop. So you're going to have to take those steps, whether it's hitting my tip jar or hitting hers, or just voting. Voting, being sure to get out to vote, and making sure your election is honest. Put pressure. Make sure people know they're being watched. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Let people see it. Let the chips fall where they may. Let the chips fall where they may. Because if we don't stand up, you're just going to give away this republic. And remember, the freedoms that we've had here in America, they're the exception. They're not the rule. If they were the rule, people wouldn't rush to come here. The people who come here because America is better than where they were. If Sicily was all that, my grandparents would have stayed there. They didn't. It's amazing that people don't understand this. But then again, it's not amazing because, as I said at the start of the podcast, this is why our enemies have bought our schools, to make sure that people don't understand this. Well, that's all the time I have today. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. Like I said, share it. Share it on YouTube. Share it on Twitter. Share it with your friends. Share it with your enemies. I don't mind leftists complaining about me. And remember, the podcast is just as valid if people watch it later than watch it live. I hope you all have a great weekend. Stay well. Oh, it's very nice of you to say that. Juliet says she loves me. My wife should not be jealous. But that was very, very nice. But like I said, and I swear to God, I did not see that before I said hit her tip jar. I swear to God, I did not see that. Well, you guys have a great rest of the day. You take care, stay well, and vote.